Picture this. You are standing in a bustling market somewhere in the Roman province of Britannia. It's damp, it's grey, and the most exciting thing that's happened all week is that a merchant from Londinium has arrived with new pottery. You sell some of your grain, and in return, he places a few small, heavy discs of metal into your hand. You've never been to Rome. You've never seen the emperor, and you probably couldn't even pronounce his full name correctly. You have no television, no newspapers, no internet. Your world is, for the most part, your village and the fields around it. So how do you know who is in charge? How do you know that hundreds of miles away, across the sea and over the mountains, a single man holds the fate of your entire world in his hand? You know because you're looking right at him. On that little piece of bronze, or perhaps silver if you've had a good harvest, is a portrait. A face rendered in profile looking stern or maybe calm, or maybe even a little bit divine. That face is your newsfeed. It's your official broadcast. It's the state-sanctioned profile picture for an empire of 50 million people. In our world, information is everywhere, screaming for our attention. For you, standing in that British market, information is a scarce and precious commodity, and the most reliable, widespread, and consistent piece of information you will ever receive comes from these coins. Every time you buy bread, pay a tax, or receive your wages as a soldier, you are participating in the most effective propaganda machine the ancient world ever produced. Think of the obverse of the coin, the head side with the portrait as the emperor's personal branding. It's not just a picture, it's a carefully curated image. The angle of the head, the style of the beard or lack thereof, the laurel wreath in his hair, every detail is a deliberate choice. It's meant to project an idea authority. 2. Stability. When you see that face, you are meant to feel that the empire is in steady hands. This isn't just a man. This is Divi Filius, the son of a god, the Pontifex Maximus, the father of the country. His titles, abbreviated in a circle around his head, are his Twitter bio, a list of credentials designed to awe and reassure you. But the real advertising campaign is on the other side, the reverse. This is where the emperor gets to post his status updates. Did he just win major military victory? You'll see a depiction of a bound captive or a trophy of captured arms. Has he just completed a massive public works project, like an aqueduct or a new harbor? You'll find a beautiful architectural rendering stamped in metal. Is he promising a future of peace and prosperity? You might see the goddess Pax holding an olive branch, or Annona, the goddess of the grain supply, holding a cornucopia. Each coin is a tiny, portable billboard celebrating the emperor's achievements and promises. Now, one of the things historians still debate to this day is just how much of this complex symbolism the average person, like you in that market, actually understood. Did you look at the image of a seated goddess and think, a wonderful visualization of the emperor's commitment to providing a stable grain supply for the citizens of Rome? Or did you just recognize it was a denarius of good silver and know you could buy a decent amount of wine with it? The answer is likely somewhere in the middle. While the nuanced political message might have been lost on some, the constant, repetitive presence of the emperor's face was not. It was an inescapable reminder of who was in charge. And here's a little detail that shows just how personal this system was. When a new emperor came to power, one of his very first acts was to mint special coins called dunatus. These weren't for general circulation. They were given out as a massive cash bonus, primarily to the soldiers of the legions. It was, in the most direct way imaginable, a payment for loyalty. Imagine a new CEO taking over and immediately having their face printed on a special batch of $100 bills handed out only to their key employees. It's a brilliant move, a way of saying, I am your source of wealth and power. Stick with me. That coin in a soldier's purse was a tangible contract, a physical link between his service and the new man on the throne. It was the ancient world's most effective and expensive welcome email. So as you clutch those coins in your hand, you hold more than just money. You hold a piece of the imperial broadcast system, a message from the center of the world designed specifically to reach you, to remind you, and to impress upon you the power and permanence of Rome, all through the face of the man who ruled it. That face on the coin in your hand feels so normal, so expected. Of course, the ruler puts his face on the money. But if you could rewind time by just a couple of 100 years, staying right there in that Roman marketplace, the coins clinking in your purse would tell a very different story. The idea of putting a living, breathing person's face on a state-sanctioned coin would have been scandalous. It was the kind of thing kings did, and if there was one thing a staunch Roman of the Republic prided themselves on, it was that they had thrown out their kings centuries ago and weren't ever going back. So, what was on their coins instead? You'd see gods and symbols of the state. One of the most common images on early Republican silver coins was the goddess Roma herself, wearing a winged helmet, looking proud and powerful. She wasn't a person, she was an idea, the personification of Rome's strength. On the reverse, you'd often find the Dioscuri, the mythical twins Castor and Pollux, charging forward on horseback. They were seen as protectors of the city. Sometimes you'd see Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings and endings, or Jupiter in his chariot. These were images designed to project collective power, divine favor, and the identity of the Republic as a whole. It was about us, not me. The currency belonged to the Senate and the people of Rome SPQR, and its imagery reflected that. The thought of one man, no matter how powerful, hijacking that public space for his own portrait was simply not done. It would be like a modern-day Treasury Secretary putting their own selfie on the dollar bill. It's just weird and deeply arrogant. But here's where a little bit of sneaky personal branding started to creep in. And it's one of those wonderful, wonky bits of Roman political life. The minting of coins was overseen by a committee of 3 junior magistrates, elected annually, called the Tree of Mersi Maunitoles, or the Three Money Men. This was often one of the first rungs on the long ladder of a political career for an ambitious young man from a noble family. And while they cowed and put their own faces on the coins, they were allowed a surprising amount of creative freedom. So what did they do? They started using the coins as tiny billboards for their family as brand. Imagine one of these young moneyers, let's call him Lucius Cornelius. Maybe his great-grandfather won a famous battle in Sicily. To commemorate that, Lucius might choose to put a symbol of Sicily on his batch of coins. Or perhaps his family name, his nomen, had a connection to a certain god or myth. He would absolutely plaster that connection all over the reverse of the coin. It was a way for him to subtly remind the public, hey, you know who's paying for this mint run? Me, from the famous Cornelius family. Remember us at the next election. It was a form of advertising, not for an individual, but for a dynasty, a clan. This was considered acceptable because it rooted the family as prestige in service to the Republic. But as the Republic began to wobble in its final century, things started to change. The personal ambitions of powerful generals like Marius, Sulla, and Pompey the Great grew too large to be contained by tradition. The symbols on the coins began to get a lot more personal. You might see a coin issued by a general featuring Venus, not just because she was a goddess of Rome, but because that general claimed direct descent from her. The reference was becoming less about the state and more about the man in charge of the legions. Historians still argue about what this shift really meant. Was it a calculated, cynical move by ambitious men to slowly chip away at republican traditions and accustom the populace to the idea of a single ruler? Or was it simply a reflection of a wider cultural change? Rome was absorbing the influence of the Greek East, where kings had been putting their realistic, human portraits on coins for centuries. Was this just an artistic trend, a new fascination with realism and individualism that naturally spilled over onto the most common form of art? It's a classic chicken and egg debate. Did the politics change the coins, or did the changing coins help to change the politics? The evidence is ambiguous enough that you can make a strong case for either side. Whatever the cause, the dam was beginning to crack. You started to see portraits of long-dead ancestors appearing on coins, often rendered with features that looked suspiciously like their living descendant who just happened to be issuing the coin. The line between honoring the past and promoting the present was becoming blurrier and blurrier. The old rule was simple: gods and dead heroes were okay, living men were not. But Rome was now a place of civil wars, of armies loyal to their generals instead of the state. The old rules were being bent, stretched, and rewritten. All it would take was one man, someone with enough power, audacity, and a complete disregard for the old taboo to finally cross that line and put his own living face on the money of Rome. And he was coming. His arrival would not just break a tradition, it would signal the death of the Republic and the birth of a new kind of power, a power that needed a face everyone could recognize. And so, the stage is set. The old traditions feel more like suggestions than rules, and the air in Rome is thick with ambition. You've seen generals put their family history on coins, you've seen them hint at their divine ancestry. But there is still one line that hasn't been crossed. It feels like an invisible fence crackling with centuries of political taboo. To put your own living face on a coin was to declare yourself a king, and everyone knew what happened to kings in Rome. You just needed someone with the perfect combination of ego, power, and a spectacular lack of concern for tradition. Enter Gaius Julius Caesar. Caesar wasn't just a brilliant general or a cunning politician. He was a master of public relations. He understood the power of image and narrative better than anyone of his generation. For years, he had been writing his own press releases in the form of his commentaries on the Gallic War, making sure everyone back in Rome read about his heroic exploits. He knew how to build a brand, and like the ambitious money heirs before him, he used coins to promote his family's story. His clan, the Julii, claimed direct descent from the goddess Venus. So, naturally, when he had the power to influence the mint, coins started appearing with beautiful portraits of Venus Genetrix, the founding mother, on them. The message was clear: my family is special. We are divinely blessed. This was still within the bounds of the new looser tradition. He was honoring a goddess who just happened to be his ancestor. But then came the Civil War. Caesar crossed the Rubicon, defeated his rival Pompey the Great, and returned to Rome not just as a successful general, but as the undisputed master of the Roman world. The Senate, with all the enthusiasm of a hostage reading a prepared statement, began piling honors upon him. He was made dictator, first for 10 years, and then, in early 44 BC, they gave him a title that sent a chill down the spine of every old-school Republican dictator perpetuo. Dictator for life. It was in this moment that the final taboo was shattered. Sometime in February of 44 BC, new silver denarii began to emerge from the mint of Rome. And when you, a citizen doing your shopping or a soldier collecting your pay, first saw one, you might have done a double take. There was no god, no long-dead hero. It was him. It was Caesar, not an idealized, godlike version of him, but a strikingly realistic portrait. You could see the lines on his face, the powerful neck, and yes, even his famously receding hairline, which he was known to be sensitive about. It was raw, it was real, and it was revolutionary. On the obverse, his portrait was surrounded by his new title, Irdictato, or Perpetuo. It wasn't a suggestion or a family boast. It was a declaration of absolute, permanent power, stamped in metal and distributed to millions. The reverse of the coin often featured Venus or sometimes other symbols of his power, like priestly implements, reminding people of his role as Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. It was a total branding package. One side told you who he was, and the other told you why he deserved to be there. This was no longer about family heritage. This was about personal authority. He wasn't just the most important man in Rome, he was Rome. Historians have been arguing for centuries about what this really meant. Was this the ultimate act of hubris, a final deliberate taunt to his political enemies? Was he essentially daring them to act, signaling that he had moved beyond the old rules and was now operating on a different plane, like the Hellenistic kings he had conquered? Or was it a more pragmatic decision? In the chaos of the post-Civil War world, perhaps he saw his own face as the ultimate symbol of stability, a guarantee that the buck stopped with him. Maybe he felt it was the only way to unify a fractured state and command the loyalty of far-flung legions. We can't know his true motivation, whether it was calculated provocation, political necessity, or a stunning lack of self-awareness about how it would be perceived by the old god. Here's a small, chilling detail: these coins were not in circulation for very long. He was granted the title of dictator for life in February. The coins bearing that title and his face appeared shortly after. On the 15th of March, the Ides of March, he was assassinated at the foot of a statue of his great rival Pompey. His reign as a living god on the currency of Rome lasted for little more than a month. For his assassins, led by Brutus and Cassius, this coin may have been the final proof of their fears. It wasn't just a piece of silver, it was evidence. It was the face of a tyrant, a king in all but name, and it confirmed in their minds that their conspiracy was not a crime, but a patriotic duty. Caesar was gone, but the precedent he set was indestructible. He had proven it could be done. He had put the face of a man on the money, and the world didn't stop turning. The psychological barrier was broken. The door had been kicked open, and after a final, bloody civil war, the man who would walk through that door would turn Caesar's shocking public relations stunt into the foundation of an entirely new system of government. The age of personal branding had truly begun. Caesar's murder didn't fix the Republic. It shattered it. The years that followed were a chaotic scramble for power. Another round of bloody civil wars that left the Roman world weary and broken. In the middle of this storm was a figure nobody took seriously at first, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir, a teenager named Octavian. He was young, he was untested, and his only real political asset was his name. And he knew it. So, in his first foray into the world of coin-based marketing, he leaned into it hard. Coins issued by his faction showed his portrait, often back-to-back with Caesar's, and the inscription was KDIV, IFILIUS. Not just Octavian, but son of the divine. Caesar had been officially deified by the Senate, and Octavian was not going to let anyone forget it. It was a brilliant piece of branding. He wasn't just another warlord, he was the heir of a god. But after years of fighting, he finally emerged as the sole victor, defeating his last rivals, Mark Antony and Cleopatra, at the Battle of Actium. The wars were over. The world was his. And now he faced an even greater challenge than winning a war, winning the peace. The Roman people were exhausted. They were tired of generals and prescriptions and civil strife. They didn't want another Caesar, another strongman who looked like a king. So Octavian, the master strategist, did something remarkable. He began one of the most successful and sophisticated rebranding campaigns in all of history. First, he changed his name. Octavian was the name of a civil war general. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him a new name, one that was dripping with prestige and religious authority, Augustus. It meant revered one or majestic, and with this new name came a new public image, meticulously crafted and broadcast to every corner of the empire on billions of coins. You are now a citizen in this new era, the era of Augustus. When you get one of his new coins, the first thing you notice is the portrait. It's a world away from Caesar's brutally realistic, almost journalistic depiction. Augustus' face is calm, serene, and eternally youthful. He is depicted in a classical, Greek style, like a hero or a god. Here's a fascinating bit of propaganda. Augustus ruled for over 40 years, well into his 70s. But on his coins he never aged past his mid-30s. A portrait minted in his final years looks almost identical to the ones from decades earlier. This was a deliberate choice. It was ancient Photoshop. The message it sent was one of stability, of timelessness, of an eternal golden age. Your emperor was getting old and frail. He was a constant, unchanging presence, guaranteeing the peace he had brought. It was profoundly reassuring. He was no longer just a man. He was an institution. But the real genius of his brand is on the reverse of the coins. He knew he couldn't just say, "I am the absolute ruler." So instead, his coins told a story of restoration and peace. One of the most famous coins he issued after his victory over Antony and Cleopatra had a simple inscription, a ETYPTOCA Egypt captured. On the surface, it's a victory coin, but its deeper message was the civil wars are finally over. He minted coins showing the Temple of Janus with its doors, a powerful and rare symbol signifying that Rome was officially at peace. Other coins showed the goddess Pax, peace herself, holding an olive branch. He was saturating the market with the message everyone wanted to hear: the nightmare is over. Even more cleverly, he branded himself as the savior of the Republic, even as he was dismantling it. A very common reverse type on his coins was the Corona Civicae, the civic crown, a simple wreath of oak leaves that was traditionally awarded to a Roman who had saved the life of a fellow citizen. On his coins, the wreath encircles the inscription, Nobis IVESSIRVATOS for saving the citizens. It's an incredibly humble-looking design, but its political power is immense. It frames him not as a conqueror, but as a protector, a first citizen who saved the entire state from self-destruction. He was the king. He was the father of his country, or Pater Patria, another title he proudly displayed on his coinage. And this leads to one of the greatest debates among historians that continues to this day: who was Augustus? Was he a truly brilliant statesman who genuinely believed he was restoring order and doing what was best for Rome, creating a republic too? Zorro that preserved old forms while ensuring stability? Or was he a deeply cynical and calculating political operator, a spin doctor of unparalleled genius, who used the language of peace and tradition to create a veil for his absolute, autocratic rule? The coins themselves can be read both ways. Are they sincere expressions of a new golden age, or are they the most effective propaganda ever devised to legitimize a military dictatorship? The truth is, he was probably both. He took the raw, shocking precedent set by Caesar the personal portrait and refined it into a subtle, pervasive, and incredibly effective to love statecraft. He created the visual language of the Roman Empire, the calm, classical portrait, the celebration of peace, the nod to republican traditions, the divine associations. He wrote the playbook. For the next 3 centuries, almost every emperor who followed would be working within the branding framework that Augustus built. He didn't just rule the empire, he curated its reality, and he did it one handful of silver and bronze at a time. That sophisticated branding framework Augustus built was a masterpiece of political communication. But one of its most potent and enduring elements was that subtle, yet persistent hum of divinity. Being the Divi Filius, the son of the divine Julius Caesar, was his foot in the door. He took that concept and turned it into a cornerstone of imperial power. For you, living under this new system, the emperor isn't just a leader. He's touched by the gods. And of course, the coins in your pocket are the primary way this message is delivered. It starts with inheritance. After Augustus, the easiest way to claim legitimacy was to be the chosen successor of the previous emperor. When a good emperor died, meaning one the Senate and the next guy liked, he was often officially deified, declared to be a god. His successor could then put DIVIF, or Son of the Divine, right in his own title on the coins. It was the ultimate divine letter of recommendation. Your new ruler wasn't just some general who seized power. He was the son of the deity who had just recently been in charge. It creates a chain of divine authority, a dynasty blessed by the heavens. But they didn't just rely on inheriting godlines. They actively associated themselves with the existing pantheon. Think of it as a divine celebrity endorsement. You'll start to see coins where the emperor is shown with a specific god. If he wants to project supreme authority, you might see a coin on the reverse showing Jupiter, king of the gods, handing the emperor a globe, a symbol of world rule. The message: Jupiter himself has delegated the management of Earth to this man. If the emperor is celebrating a military victory, the coin might show Mars, the god of war, leading him into battle. It was just the emperor's victory. It was a divinely sanctioned one. This elevates the emperor from being merely a successful commander to being the chosen instrument of the god's will. And then there's the headwear. On your bronze and silver coins, you're used to seeing the emperor with a simple laurel wreath or even bareheaded. But sometimes, you'll get a coin where HES wearing something different, a crown with spikes or rays coming off of it, like a stylized sun. This is the radiate crown, and it's a piece of pure theological branding. It directly links the emperor to Sol, the unconnected sun god, or sometimes Apollo in his solar aspect. It's a visual shorthand for divinity, a way of saying I have the light of a god within me. Here's a wonderfully nerdy little fact on bronze coins. This radiate crown was also often a practical marker of value. Annas might show the emperor bareheaded, while a diapong dias, worth to asses, would show him wearing the radiate crown. It's so perfectly Roman, a symbol of divine power that also helps you make sure you're getting the right change at the market. This brings us to one of the most fascinating questions that academics still debate: did anyone actually believe this stuff? When you, a celery farmer from Spain, saw a coin with the emperor wearing a sun god crown, did you genuinely think, wow, our leader is a living deity? Or was it more like a political metaphor that everyone understood? The answer probably varies wildly depending on who you were and where you lived. In the eastern provinces, in places like Egypt and Syria, there was a long, pre-Roman tradition of ruler worship. For them, a king being a god was a totally normal concept. But back in Rome, for a member of the old senatorial elite, the idea of worshipping a living man was still deeply uncomfortable and, frankly, a bit tacky. For them, it was more likely seen as a test of loyalty rather than a statement of actual faith. You honor the emperor's genius, his guardian spirit, as a way of showing your allegiance to the state he represents. The most explicit divine promotion, however, was usually reserved for after the emperor was safely dead. When an emperor like Augustus or Vespasian was deified, a special series of coins, known as consecration coins, were issued. These are some of the most beautiful and interesting coins from the period. You might see a coin with the deceased emperor's portrait on the front, with the inscription Divusaugus, the divine Augustus. Then on the reverse, you'd see the instrument of his deification. Sometimes it was a grand, multi-tiered funeral pyre. Other times, and more poetically, you'd see an eagle, the bird of Jupiter, soaring towards the heavens, sometimes carrying the soul of the emperor on its back. This was the final press release, the official announcement to the entire empire that their former leader had successfully completed his journey to godhood. It also served to remind you that the new guy, his son or successor, now had another god in his corner. So as you go about your day, the coins passing through your hands are reinforcing a complex theological and political argument. They tell you that your leader is descended from gods, endorsed by gods, and might even become a god himself one day. Whether you take that literally or just as a powerful symbol of state authority, the message is the same: this person's power is not just from earthly sources. To oppose him isn't just treason, it might be blasphemy. It adds another layer of untouchable, awe-inspiring authority to the face staring up at you from the palm of your hand. As the imperial system solidifies, the issue of what happens when the old emperor dies becomes the single most dangerous and destabilizing moment for the entire empire. Augustus had a long, messy, and frankly unlucky time trying to figure out who would succeed him, with his preferred heirs dying off one by one. He learned the hard way that a smooth transition of power was everything. So how do you solve this problem? How do you tell 50 million people, this is the next guy, please don't start a civil war when I'm gone? You put him on the payroll, then you put him on the coins. Imagine you're living in the reign of a stable emperor. Let's say Vespasian. He came to power after the chaotic era of the 4 emperors, so he knows just how important stability is. He has 2 sons, Titus and Domitian. To make his succession plan crystal clear, he doesn't just announce it in the Senate. He makes Titus his junior co-emperor, and then he starts minting coins that are essentially family portraits. You'll find coins with Vespasian as grizzled, veteran face on the obverse, and on the reverse, you'll see his 2 sons, Titus and Domitian, standing side by side. Sometimes, one of them will be on the front and the other 2 on the back. The whole family gets FaceTime on the imperial currency. This is not just a proud dad showing off his kids. This is a public service announcement. It's a trailer for the next season of the Roman Empire. By placing his sons on the coins, Vespasian is accustoming you, the user of the coin, to their faces. He is making them part of the official iconography of power long before they actually hold supreme power. When he eventually dies, and a coin with Titus's face on it, as the sole emperor appears, it won't be a shock. You've been seeing that face for a decade. The transition feels natural, inevitable. The brand has already been established. This practice becomes a standard part of the imperial toolkit. An emperor would elevate his chosen successor, who was often his son, but could also be an adopted heir, to the rank of Caesar. This was like being the official emperor in training. The Caesar would get his own coin types. His portrait would appear on the money, often with an inscription that highlighted his youth, like PRINCEPSIVVENTVTIS, the Prince of Youth. This was a title designed to appeal to the military, to show that the next generation of leadership was young, vigorous, and ready. The reverse of these coins would often show symbols of hope and future prosperity. It's a marketing campaign aimed directly at ensuring a peaceful future. Here's a quirky little detail that shows the level of thought that went into this. The portrait of the Caesar would often be styled to look very similar to the reigning emperor, the Augustus. If the Augustus wore a short, military-style beard, you can bet the Caesar on the coins would have a similar beard, even if he was just a teenager who could barely grow one. It was visual branding to emphasize continuity and a seamless transfer of the family look. It's like a corporate logo. You want the brand identity to remain consistent, even when the CEO changes. However, one of the more contentious questions among historians is how much choice was really involved. When an emperor like Marcus Aurelius, the famous philosopher king, appointed his own biological son, Commodus, as his heir, did he do it because he truly thought Commodus was the best man for the job? Or was he trapped by the expectation of dynastic succession he himself had promoted on his coinage for years? Marcus Aurelius had been shown with his wife Faustina and their many children on coins, projecting an image of a happy, fertile, and stable imperial family. To then bypass his own son in favor of a more qualified general might have been seen as a betrayal of the very brand he had so carefully built. It's a classic debate: does the man make the brand, or does the brand eventually start making the man's decisions for him? We know how it turned out with Commodus, and it wasn't pretty. This system of advertising the heir apparent worked brilliantly until it didn't. What happens when an emperor is overthrown or assassinated? The first thing the new guy does is mint coins with his own face, of course. But he also has to deal with the memory of the previous dynasty. Often, the coins of the previous Caesar, the heir who never was, would be aggressively recalled and melted down. The public declaration of succession is a promise, and when that promise is broken by violence, the physical evidence of it has to be erased from circulation as quickly as possible. The trailer for the movie that never got made is pulled from the airwaves. So, when you see a coin with two faces on it, or the face of a younger man titled Caesar, you are holding a piece of imperial succession planning. It's a statement of intent, a promise of stability, and a way to introduce the next star of the show before the current one takes his final bow. It was Rome's way of trying to solve the problem of tomorrow today. It was a political forecast, stamped in bronze and silver, designed to reassure you that the empire would continue, seamlessly and peacefully, long after the old emperor's face was replaced by a new one. For a while now, you've gotten used to seeing the faces of powerful men on your money. The stern emperor, the youthful heir, it's become the standard visual language of the empire. But then one day you're in the market haggling for some olives, and the merchant hands you back a shiny new denarius. You glance at it, and for the first time you see the portrait of a woman. It might be the emperor's wife, his mother, or his sister. This isn't just a revolution in currency. It's a statement about the nature of power itself. The imperial brand isn't just about one man anymore. It's about a family. It's about a dynasty. The first woman to really get this treatment was Livia, the formidable wife of Augustus. While he was alive, he was careful not to put her portrait on the official coinage of Rome, as that would look too much like a royal monarchy. But in the provinces, coins were minted that showed them together, hinting at their partnership. After Augustus died and her son Tiberius became emperor, she was granted the title Augusta, and coins were issued showing her as the personification of justice or piety. The message was clear: she was a co-founder of the imperial peace, the revered matriarch of the ruling house. From that point on, putting the Augusta on a coin became a powerful tool. It served several purposes. First, and most obviously, it was about fertility and succession. You'll see coins of empresses, like Faustina the Younger, the wife of Marcus Aurelius, with the inscription FECUND ITISAUGUSTAE, the fertility of the empress. The reverse of these coins often shows her standing with several small children. This wasn't just a happy family snapshot. It was a political guarantee. It told the empire, don't worry about civil wars. We have plenty of heirs. The future is secure. It was the ancient equivalent of a royal baby announcement, meant to reassure the public of long-term stability. Second, the empresses became the official faces of Roman morality. While the emperor's brand was about power, victory, and authority, his wife's brand was about virtue. Coins were minted with inscriptions like PUD, ICITIII, modesty or chastity, showing the empress in a veiled, demure pose. Or you might see CONCORDIA, harmony, celebrating the stable and harmonious marriage of the imperial couple. The empress was held up as the ideal Roman matron, a model of dignity and traditional family values for every woman in the empire. She was the moral anchor of the state. But here's the really fun part. The detail that brings these women to life. These coins were, in effect, the Roman equivalent of the cover of Vogue. The most immediate and striking feature of an empress's portrait was her hair. The hairstyles of women like Sabina Hadrian's wife or Julia Domna, wife of Septimus Severus, were works of art. We're talking about incredibly elaborate architectural creations of braids, buns, waves, and curls that must have taken hours and a team of skilled slaves to construct. These weren't just personal style choices, they were fashion statements broadcast to millions. A wealthy woman in Gaul or Greece would see a new coin with the Augustus' latest hairdo, and she would immediately want her own hair styled in the same way. The coins were the fastest way to transmit high fashion from the court in Rome to the farthest corners of the provinces. They are one of our best sources for understanding trends in Roman female adornment. This, of course, leads to a rich and ongoing debate among historians. How much real power did these women have? Were their coin portraits a reflection of their actual political influence, or were they simply another carefully managed aspect of the emperor's PR? The answer, frustratingly, is it depends. On one hand, you have figures like Agrippina the Younger, mother of Nero. Early in Nero's reign, coins were issued showing his boyish face on one side and her powerful, mature portrait on the other. Some even showed them facing each other as near equals. This almost certainly reflects the reality that she was the true power behind the throne in those early years. Similarly, Julia Domna was given titles like Mater Castrorum, mother of the army counts, a profoundly military and political title. Her commanding presence on coins suggests a woman who was a genuine partner in power. On the other hand, for many empresses, the iconography is entirely generic. They are simply symbols of fertility and modesty. Their personality is completely subsumed by their function in the imperial branding machine. Their portraits were there to make their husbands look good, to show him as a man with a stable family, a virtuous wife, and a secure succession. In this view, the empress on the coin is not a person but a prop, a tool used to round out the emperor's own image. So when you hold a coin with a woman's face on it, you're looking at a complex piece of political and cultural messaging. You are seeing a promise of dynastic stability, a model of public morality, and the hottest hairstyle of the year, all packed onto one small silver disc. And you're also touching on a central question of power. Was this woman a queen in her own right, or was she just the most elegant and high-profile part of the emperor's marketing team? You've seen how the imperial brand is supposed to work. It's a finely tuned machine of tradition, authority, and family values. It's about projecting stability. But what happens when the person in charge isn't interested in the old brand? What if the emperor sees himself not as a stoic father figure, but as a rock star? You get the reign of Nero, and you get to witness one of the most fascinating brand implosions in history, all told through the little metal discs passing through your hands. When Nero first comes to the throne, he is a handsome, popular teenager, and his branding team led by his mother Agrippina, the philosopher Seneca, and the Praetorian prefect Burrus starts off playing all the hits. His early coins are straight out of the Augustan playbook. You see his youthful portrait looking noble and responsible. As we mentioned, you even see him sharing the spotlight with his powerful mother, a nod to the real power behind the scenes. One of his first major PR moves was to close the doors of the Temple of Janus, just like Augustus had done to signal an era of peace. And naturally, he minted a beautiful coin to commemorate it, featuring a detailed image of the temple with its doors shut tight, and the inscription BACEP, Tur, TORIMARIQ, DAINVMCLVSIT, the peace of the Roman people having been established on land and sea. He closed Janus. It was textbook. It was perfect. The brand was off to a great start, but Nero had other interests. He didn't dream of leading legions or debating in the Senate. He dreamed of the stage. He saw himself as a world-class artist, a virtuoso singer, poet, and chariot racer. And as he consolidated his power, pushing his mother and his advisors aside, his personal brand began to bleed into his imperial one. You start to see coins that would have made Augustus spit out his wine. Instead of a goddess or a military trophy on the reverse, you might see Apollo, the god of music, holding a lyre. This was Nero's way of associating himself with his favorite deity. Then he took it one step further. He minted coins that showed himself dressed as Apollo playing the lyre. For a modern audience, this might seem harmless, even charming. Oh, the emperor as a hobby. But for the Roman elite, this was deeply, profoundly scandalous. In Roman society, performing on a public stage for applause was not something a respectable person did. It was the work of actors, musicians, and other infamous people of low social standing. For the emperor, the embodiment of Roman dignity and authority, to publicly display himself as a musician was mortifying. It was a complete violation of every traditional Roman value. He wasn't projecting authority, he was projecting artistry. To the senators and generals, it was embarrassing and frivolous. This is where historians still argue. Was Nero a misunderstood visionary, trying to pivot the Roman power model away from a purely military political one towards a more cultured, Greek-style Hellenistic kingship where artistic patronage and performance were signs of a sophisticated ruler? Was he trying to create a new kind of brand, a Renaissance man emperor for a new age? Or was he simply a spoiled, narcissistic young man, completely detached from reality and tradition, who used the imperial mint as his personal recording studio to promote his own hobbies? The coins don't give a clear answer, but they show a man charting a course far from the safe harbors of his predecessors. Then came the Great Fire of 64 AD. The city of Rome burns for 6 days. Vast swaths of it are reduced to ash and rubble. You are there in the panicked crowds, watching your world go up in smoke. The rumor starts, the one that will stick to Nero forever, that he stood on his palace roof, playing his lyre and singing about the fall of Troy while his city burned. It's almost certainly not true. He was out of town when the fire started and rushed back to lead relief efforts. But the story was too good to check, and his actions afterwards cemented this pure disaster. What did he do? On the huge, cleared-out wasteland in the center of the city, he began construction of his new palace, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. It was an impossibly vast and opulent complex of villas, gardens, a colossal statue of himself, and even an artificial lake. To a populace that had just lost everything, it looked like the emperor was building his dream home on their tragedy. It was the most tone-deaf act imaginable. Now, his coin response was actually a mixed bag. He did mint coins with the goddess Ceres seated, holding grain ears and a torch, a promise of a secure food supply for the displaced population. He issued new, slightly lighter coins to pump more currency into the economy for rebuilding. He even minted a stunning coin showcasing his new port at Ostia, a massive engineering project designed to improve Rome's grain supply. In his mind, this coin probably advertised his foresight and his ability to provide for the people. But to a cynical public, it could easily be seen as him bragging about his grand projects while they were still living in squalor. His brand was now fatally split. On one hand, he was trying to use the coins to project an image of a provider and a rebuilder. On the other hand, his personal reputation was that of a self-indulgent artist who cared more for his lyre and his golden palace than for his people. The message on the coin simply wasn't landing because it no longer matched the man. He had lost control of the narrative. The brand had failed. When rebellions finally broke out, he had squandered so much political capital and traditional authority that his support evaporated overnight. The face on the coin had become the face of a tyrant, not because it was cruel or fearsome, but because it was seen as frivolous, self-obsessed, and profoundly un-Roman. Nero's dramatic exit left a power vacuum, and the empire spiraled into a year of bloody chaos known as the Year of the Four Emperors. 4 different generals, backed by their legions, rose and fell in quick succession. It was a brutal reminder that ultimate power in Rome still came from the army, not from a carefully crafted brand. The eventual winner of this violent scramble was a no-nonsense, experienced commander named Vespasian. He wasn't a glamorous aristocrat like Nero. He was a practical, down-to-earth soldier from a humble family, and he had a massive PR problem. He had taken power by force, the city was broke, and the people were weary of war. He needed to establish his legitimacy fast. Vespasian and his sons, Titus and Domitian, who formed the Flavian dynasty, were masters of practical marketing. They knew they couldn't compete with the old Julio-Claudian dynasty's divine lineage, so they built their brand on something much more tangible, giving back to the people and restoring order. Their slogan, repeated on coins, was ROMARESURGNS, Rome rising again. They were the cleanup crew, the sensible managers coming in after the wild party. Their coin portraits reflect this. Vespasian's face is not idealized or godlike. He is shown as he was a balding, weathered old soldier with a wrinkled, powerful face. It's a portrait that says, "I'm not here to sing you a song. I'm here to get the job done." And the Flavian dynasty needed a signature project, a grand gesture to win over the public and physically erase the memory of Nero's self-indulgence. When Nero had built his private, luxurious golden house, Vespasian decided to build something for the people of Rome. He drained Nero's artificial lake and, on that very spot, began construction of a massive, permanent stone amphitheater for public spectacles. We call it the Colosseum. It was a stroke of marketing genius. It was a direct, physical repudiation of Nero's legacy. He built a private paradise for himself. Vespasian was saying, "I will build a public arena for all of you." The project was immensely expensive and took years to complete. Vespasian died before it was finished, and his son Titus presided over the grand opening in 80 AD. To celebrate this monumental achievement and ensure that every single person in the empire knew about it, Titus issued a special series of commemorative coins. These coins are some of the most famous and sought after in all of Roman numismatics. You are a merchant in Ephesus, and one of these new silver denarii comes into your possession. On the obverse is the standard, reassuring portrait of the Emperor Titus. But you flip it over, and you see something you've never seen before, a detailed architectural rendering of the brand new Flavian amphitheater. The coin depicts the Colosseum from an angle, showing its distinctive multi-story arcades. You can even see tiny statues on the arches. To one side is a fountain, the Meter Sudanes, and on the other, a portico-ed building. It's not just a symbol, it's a picture. It's a tiny, metallic advertisement for the greatest entertainment venue in the world. It's a way of sharing this incredible Roman achievement with someone who might never get to see it in person. It's a source of immense civic pride. It's the ancient equivalent of a postcard from the capital, a message that says, "Look what we have built. Look at the glory of Rome under our new, sensible dynasty." Of course, like all good propaganda, there's a debate about what it really means. Some historians see this coin as a straightforward celebration of a magnificent public gift. It's a symbol of Flavian generosity and a return to the bread and circuses model of keeping the populace happy. But others see a more subtle, and perhaps more cynical message. The Colosseum was built with the spoils of war from the brutal suppression of the Jewish revolt, a campaign led by Vespasian and Titus. The structure itself was built in part by thousands of enslaved Jewish prisoners. So, is the coin just an ad for a stadium? Or is it also a quiet, constant reminder of Flavian military might and the brutal consequences of rebellion? It's likely both. It celebrates their generosity to the citizens of Rome while being funded by the subjugation of its enemies. Here's a curious little detail for you. While the coins show the exterior in great detail, some rarer bronze versions, large SES-III, seem to show the emperor and the crowd inside, or scenes of the games. These coins were the tickets, the programs, and the souvenirs all rolled into one. They didn't just advertise the building, they advertised the experience. The message was holistic. The Flavians don't just build you a venue, they provide the spectacle to fill it. Holding the Colosseum coin in your hand, you hold a masterpiece of political communication. It simultaneously glorifies a specific dynasty, advertises a major architectural achievement, solidifies a new political order, and erases the memory of a failed one. It's a symbol of peace and entertainment that is built on the foundations of war and conquest. It's the perfect example of how a simple coin could tell a story that was much bigger and more complex than the image stamped upon it. It was the Flavian-esque grand statement, their proof that they weren't just another set of generals who got lucky. They were builders, they were restorers, and they had just given Rome its most enduring icon. The Flavian dynasty, for all its practical marketing, ended in bloodshed with the assassination of the unpopular Domitian. The Senate, seizing the moment, appointed one of its own, an elderly, childless senator named Nerva, to take the throne. This act ushered in a period that the 18th century historian Edward Gibbon would famously label the era of the five good emperors. It was a time of relative peace and stability, often considered the golden age of the Roman Empire. But this golden age didn't happen by accident. It was underpinned by a new, more philosophical approach to imperial branding, a shift you can literally feel in the weight and message of the coins in your purse. The problem Nerva faced was the same one every new emperor faced: legitimacy. He had no army, no dynasty, and no great victories to his name, so he built his brand on an idea. His coins start to feature abstract concepts, the personified virtues of a good ruler. You'll see reverses with inscriptions like AEQITAS equity, showing a figure with scales, or LIBERTA SPUBLICA public freedom, showing the goddess Libertas holding a freedman's cap. He was marketing his reign not on personal power, but on principles. It was a direct contrast to Domitian's more autocratic style. The message was, I am not a tyrant, I am the servant of these timeless Roman values. But Nerva was old. Everyone knew he wouldn't last long. To prevent another civil war, he did something brilliant. Instead of choosing a family member, he adopted the most powerful and respected general in the empire, a man named Trajan, as his son and heir. This act established the adoptive principle that would define this era. The emperor chose his successor based on merit, not blood. It was a PR masterstroke, combining the stability of a clear succession with the ideal of picking the best man for the job. When you get your first coin of the Emperor Trajan, the branding feels solid, powerful. His portrait is mature and commanding. His official title on the coins is OPTIMUSP RINCEPS, the best emperor, a title bestowed by the Senate. He wasn't just good, he was officially the best. But like his adoptive father, Nerva, his coins continued to heavily feature the promises of his administration, personified as goddesses. You'll see PAX peace, SPS hope, and a new one that becomes incredibly important, ANNONA. Annona was the goddess of the grain supply, and by putting her on his coins, holding ears of corn and a cornucopia, Trajan was making a very direct and personal promise to you, the average citizen under my rule. You will not starve. It was a simple, powerful message of security and provision. This era sees a flourishing of these abstract Persephoniscanes. The emperor's brand becomes less about what I have done and more about what I stand for. During the reign of Hadrian, you'll see coins celebrating CLEMENTIA mercy and IUSDITIA justice. Under Antoninus Pius, whose reign was famously peaceful, the coins are dominated by images of TRANQUILLITIS tranquility and PIETAS piety, or duty to the gods and state. The whole vibe of the imperial brand has shifted. It's calmer, more confident, more philosophical. This leads to a fascinating debate among historians. Was this era genuinely a golden age ruled by enlightened philosopher kings who truly embodied these virtues? Or was this just the most sophisticated and successful branding campaign yet? The traditional view, passed down from Gibbon, is that these were genuinely good men, and their coins reflect their virtuous rule. But a more cynical modern take suggests that this was simply very clever politics. By branding themselves with abstract virtues, they were making their authority seem natural and beyond question. Who could argue against justice or peace? It was a way of elevating their rule above petty politics and into the realm of philosophical certainty. A coin in your hand wasn't just a promise from a man, it was a guarantee from an ideal. And here's a wonderfully weird little fact from this period. While the emperors were busy advertising their high-minded virtues, they were also running a massive welfare program called the Alimentae. This was a state fund that provided subsidies to help support poor children, especially in rural Italy. And how did they advertise this incredibly progressive social program? They minted special coins. You might get a bronze sestertius showing the emperor seated on a dais with an allegorical figure of Italy holding a child, reaching out to him. It's an incredibly touching scene of imperial beneficence. It's a literal depiction of the state acting as a safety net. It's so specific and so heartwarming, a far cry from the usual military or divine imagery. It's a coin that says, your emperor cares about your children's future. So, as you live through this period, the coins passing through your hands tell a story of a new kind of power. It's a power based on merit, not just blood. It's a power that defines itself by its duties and virtues, not just its victories. It promises you justice, tranquility, and a full stomach. The face on the coin is no longer just a ruler. He is the guarantor of a system, the CEO of a golden age. Whether this was a genuine Roman utopia, or just its most perfect advertisement, is something people will argue about forever. But for you, holding a heavy silver denarius with the serene face of Antoninus Pius on one side and the goddess of tranquility on the other, it certainly felt like the real thing. The golden age of abstract virtues and peaceful promises was a beautiful brand, but Rome was still a military empire, and no emperor embodied the aggressive expansionist side of that brand better than Trajan. He may have been an Optimus Princeps, but he was a soldier first. Before becoming emperor, he was a general on the Rhine frontier. He understood the legions, and he knew that the ultimate source of Roman power and his own popularity was military victory. His predecessor Nerva had stabilized the government. His successor Hadrian would consolidate the borders. But Trajan was a conqueror, and he launched the last great military expansion of the Roman Empire, conquering the kingdom of Dacia, which is modern-day Romania. This war wasn't just a military campaign, it was a massive economic undertaking. Dacia was rich in gold and silver mines, resources that Rome desperately needed. The conquest brought an enormous influx of wealth into the empire, enough to fund one of the most ambitious building programs in Roman history. But before the building could begin, the victory had to be sold to the public. The war had been long and hard fought, and Trajan needed to justify it and celebrate it in a way that reached every citizen. He needed to turn his military success into brand capital. And so the mints went into overdrive. You are a tavern owner in Hispania, Trajan's home province. For years, you've been seeing coins with the usual promises of peace and prosperity. But now, a new series of coins starts to appear in your customers' purses. These are not about abstract concepts. They are a newsreel from the front lines. They are a serialized story of the Dacian Wars, told in silver and bronze. Trajan effectively turned his coinage into a flowing, dynamic war bulletin. One coin might show a stylized depiction of the massive bridge Trajan's engineers built across the Danube River, a breathtaking feat of military engineering. The reverse inscription might read Da NVVIVS, personifying the river god subdued by Roman ingenuity. Another coin would show a scene of battle, with a Roman soldier striking down a Dacian warrior. A different one might depict Trajan himself standing on a platform, addressing his jeering troops. It's a highlight reel of the entire campaign. You get to see the engineering, the combat, the leadership, all from the safety of your tavern. But the most iconic and repeated image from this series is the aftermath of victory. You'll see countless coins showing a female figure, the personification of the province of Dacia, sitting on a pile of shields and weapons in an attitude of mourning. Her head is bowed, her spirit broken. Sometimes, a Roman soldier stands guard over her. The inscription reads Da CIACAPTA, Dacia conquered. It's a powerful and frankly brutal image. It's the visual proof of total victory. For a Roman citizen, it was a source of pride and security. For anyone in a province thinking of rebellion, it was a chilling warning. Here's a small detail that shows the depth of this propaganda campaign. The Dacian warriors were famous for a specific type of curved sword, the falx. On some of these coins, you can see the distinctive shape of the falx included in the pile of captured arms. This level of detail was meant to add authenticity. It wasn't just a generic defeated enemy. It was specifically the Dacians, with their famous weapons, who had been crushed by the might of Rome. It made the victory more real and more impressive. The ultimate advertisement for this victory, however, wasn't a coin but a building Trajan's forum in Rome, and at its center, the magnificent Trajan's column. This colossal column is famous for its continuous spiral frieze, a 625-foot-long stone carving that tells the entire story of the Dacian Wars in incredible detail. It's a comic book carved in marble, and here is where the story comes full circle. The scenes depicted on the column, the river crossing, the emperor addressing the troops, the battles, the defeated enemies are the exact same scenes you have been seeing on the coins in your pocket. This leads to a fascinating chicken and egg debate among art historians and numismatists. Did the artists carving the grand column use the coin designs as a template? Or did the mint engravers, the seller to raise, take inspiration from the monumental public artwork of the column and shrink it down to coin size? Or, and this is perhaps the most likely answer, were both the coin designers and the column sculptors working from a now-lost master set of illustrations, an official book of approved propaganda images that came straight from the emperor's PR team? We will likely never know for sure, but it shows an incredible level of coordination in Trajan-esque branding. The message was consistent, whether you were looking at a tiny bronze coin in Britain or standing in awe at the base of a 100-foot marble column in the heart of Rome. So as you stack your earnings at the end of the day, those little metal discs are far more than just money. They are chapters in an epic story of conquest. They are a mobile art gallery celebrating Roman military power. They justified a war, celebrated a victory, and warned any potential enemies. Trajan's reign shows the imperial brand at its most aggressive. He wasn't just selling peace and stability. He was selling total victory, and he delivered the receipts directly into the hands of his 50 million customers. After the aggressive expansion of Trajan, the vibe of the empire needed to change. The next emperor, Trajan's adopted son Hadrian, was a completely different kind of man. He was a restless intellectual, a lover of Greek culture, an amateur architect, and a man who seemed to be genuinely more interested in spreadsheets than in battlefields. He looked at the vast, sprawling empire Trajan had conquered and decided his job wasn't to make it bigger, but to make it better, more stable, and more secure. His brand was not conquest, but consolidation. He was the empire's grand inspector, and his first move was to pull back from some of Trajan's less defensible eastern conquests, signaling an end to the era of expansion. His most famous act of consolidation, of course, was the wall he built across the north of Britain. But Hadrian didn't just sit in Rome and issue decrees. He was, by a huge margin, the most well-traveled emperor in Roman history. He spent more than half of his 21-year reign outside of Italy, personally visiting almost every province in the empire, from the cold, damp frontiers of Germania to the hot, sandy deserts of Egypt. He was a hands-on CEO, personally checking in on every department of his vast corporation, and this epic journey became the central theme of his imperial branding. He turned his reign into the ultimate travel blog, and the coins were his posts. You are a weaver living in Alexandria, Egypt. The emperor himself has recently visited your city, an event of immense significance. Sometime after his departure, new coins begin to circulate from the local mint. On the obverse is Hadrian's familiar portrait, always depicted with a beard, a fashion choice that was a nod to his love for Greek philosophy and a radical break from the clean-shaven emperors before him. You flip the coin over and you don't see a god or a military standard. Instead, you see a personification of your own home. There's a figure representing Augustus, often shown reclining on the ground next to an ibis, a sacred local bird. The inscription might read DGIPTI to the arrival of the Augustus in Egypt, or simply AEGYPTOS. This was part of a massive, unprecedented series of coins now known as the Travel Series or Province Series. As Hadrian toured the empire, he authorized the minting of coins that celebrated each specific region he visited. There are coins for Hispania Spain, showing a female figure with a rabbit at her feet. There are coins for Britannia, showing a warrior figure seated on a rock. There are coins for Dacia, no longer shown as a defeated captive mourning her loss, but as a peaceful province with her children, holding a Roman standard. This was a revolutionary rebranding. For the first time, the provinces were not just being portrayed as conquered territories or sources of revenue. They were being celebrated as individual parts of a larger Roman commonwealth. It was a message of unity in diversity. Hadrian was using the coins to say, "I see you. I have visited you. Your province is an important and valued part of the Roman world." It was an incredibly savvy way to foster a sense of shared identity and belonging across a vast and multicultural empire. It transformed the relationship between the center and the periphery. You weren't just a subject of Rome. You were a citizen of a global community, personally visited by its leader. Of course, historians still debate the true motive behind this. Was Hadrian a genuine multiculturalist, a visionary who saw the empire as a commonwealth of peoples and wanted to use the coins to express this new, more inclusive ideology? Or was this just a brilliant PR stunt? Was he simply trying to shore up the loyalty of the provinces, making them feel important while continuing to extract their taxes and resources? By celebrating their local identities on the official currency, was he co-opting that identity into the service of Rome? It's a classic was he sincere or was he just a genius marketer argument, and the evidence can be interpreted both ways. Here's a small but fascinating detail within this series. Sometimes the reverse of the coin doesn't just celebrate the province, but it also shows the emperor himself in the act of being a good ruler there. A coin might depict Hadrian, the personification of a province, standing face to face, clasping hands. On others, you'll see a scene with the inscription REST, IEVTORIACHAIE to the restorer of Achaea. Greece. It shows Hadrian, the great Philhellene, literally helping the figure of Greece to her feet. He's not just a tourist, he's a benefactor, a helper, a restorer. He's personally lifting up each part of his empire. It's an incredibly powerful and intimate image of imperial care. Holding one of Hadrian's travel coins was a profoundly different experience from holding one of Trajan's war bulletins. Trajan's coins told a story of us versus them. They were about Rome conquering the world. Hadrian's coins told a story of us together. They were about Rome as the world. They were souvenirs of a personal visit from the most powerful man on earth, a metallic acknowledgement of your specific place within the grand imperial tapestry. It was a shift from a brand based on dominance to a brand based on partnership, or at least a very convincing advertisement for one. It was the branding of a man who saw the empire not as a ladder to be climbed, but as a garden to be cultivated. You've seen how emperors build their brands, advertise their heirs, and celebrate their achievements on coins. The currency in your hand is a continuous story of power and success. But what happens when an emperor fails? What happens when a ruler is so hated, so tyrannical, or so incompetent that after his death, the state wants to pretend he never existed? This is the world of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory, and it's one of the most fascinating and brutal aspects of Roman political culture, a process that sometimes played out on the very coins you used every day. Imagine you're living at the end of the reign of Emperor Commodus. He has been a disaster, megalomania, cruel, and neglectful. After his assassination, the Senate officially declares his memory to be damned. They order his statues to be torn down, his name to be chiseled off of public inscriptions, and his acts to be nullified. The goal is to systematically erase him from the official historical record. But there's a problem. What do you do about the tens of millions of coins bearing his face and name that are circulating throughout the entire empire? Recalling every single coin from circulation is a logistical nightmare, practically impossible. It would take years and a massive amount of resources. So while a formal recall might be ordered, the reality on the ground is much messier. The new emperor, Pertinax, and then Septimus Severus after him, will start minting their own coins as fast as possible to replace the old ones. But the damned coins are still out there. So what happens to them? Sometimes, You'll see coins that have been deliberately mutilated. A soldier in a barracks, angry at the memory of the tyrant who may have cheated him out of pay, might take a chisel and scratch out the portrait on a bronze sestertius. A merchant might refuse to accept a coin of the disgraced emperor, or only accept it at a lower value. The brand has become so toxic that the physical object itself is now tainted. More officially, you sometimes find coins that have been countermarked. A new emperor's government, needing to get currency into a particular region quickly, might take a stack of old coins of a disgraced predecessor and stamp a small, new symbol over the portrait. It's a way of reauthorizing the coin. It says, okay, this piece of metal is still valid money, but we officially disapprove of the guy on it. Here's our little stamp of approval to make it usable. It's like putting a new management sticker on the old emperor's face. The most thorough form of erasure, however, was simply melting them down. The mints would gather as many of the old coins as they could, throw them into the furnace, and re-strike them with the new emperor's face. The metal itself was recycled. The memory of the old ruler literally vaporized and reformed into the image of the new one. This is one of the reasons why coins of short-lived or damned emperors, like Caligula, are often much rarer for collectors today than those of long-reigning, successful emperors. Their brand was deliberately and systematically purged from the numismatic record. This whole concept of damning a memory is, of course, a source of endless debate for historians. Did it actually work? Could you really erase a person from history just by destroying their statues and coins? The evidence suggests not really. The Roman historian Suetonius wrote incredibly detailed, gossipy biographies of emperors like Caligula and Nero. If the goal was total erasure, it was a spectacular failure. So what was the point? Some historians argue that damn idiom memoria, he wasn't really about erasing history for future generations, but about political theater for the current one. It was a powerful, symbolic act that allowed the new regime to publicly and violently break with the past. By tearing down the statues and condemning the coins, the Senate and the new emperor were performing a kind of political exorcism. They were cleansing the state of the tyrant's lingering presence. It was a message to the people of Rome that nightmare is over. We're the ones who ended it. We are the good guys. It was less about historical accuracy and more about immediate political branding. Here's a fascinatedly weird little detail about this. Sometimes the erasure was total. There's a famous marble portrait of the Emperor Caracalla with his family. After Caracalla had his brother and co-emperor, Geta, murdered, he issued a sweeping damn idiom memoria against him. On this family portrait, you can see where Geta's face once was. It has been carefully chiseled away, leaving a blank, ghostly void. The erasure itself becomes a powerful statement. You aren't just forgetting the person, you are remembering that they were so terrible, they had to be forgotten. The absence of the brand becomes its own form of branding. Similarly, a coin with a scratched-out face isn't just a valueless piece of metal. It's a physical artifact of political rage. So when you come across a coin that looks worn or damaged, it might not just be from centuries of being in the ground. It might be a victim of this ancient form of cancel culture. The face staring up at you was once the most powerful brand in the world, a symbol of ultimate authority. But that brand failed, and in response, the state, or even just an angry individual, tried to wipe it from existence, turning a piece of official propaganda into a testament of its own failure. You've witnessed the dignified branding of the good emperors and the political erasure of the bad ones. The system seems to have a certain rhythm. But then comes Commodus, the son of the philosopher King Marcus Aurelius, and he throws the entire imperial branding playbook into a bonfire. If Nero saw himself as a misunderstood artist, Commodus saw himself as a divine superhero, a physical specimen of godly power. His reign is a masterclass in how to take a powerful, established brand and run it into the ground with pure, uncut hegemonia. When Commodus first becomes emperor, his coins are relatively standard. HES, the son of a beloved ruler, and the initial branding plays on that continuity. You see his portrait, young and handsome, looking very much like his father. The reverses feature the usual cast of gods and Persephoniscanes promising peace and prosperity. But Commodus was not his father. He had no interest in philosophy administration or military campaigns. His passions were the gladiatorial arena, and his own magnificent physique. And, slowly but surely, this obsession began to dominate his public image. You were a soldier stationed on the Danube frontier. You've been receiving the same old denarii for years. Then a new batch arrives from the mint in Rome, and you can't believe your eyes. You flip the coin over, and instead of Jupiter or the goddess of victory, you see a scene celebrating Commodus' skill as a gladiator. The inscription might read VIRTUT, IRTUT, IIUGUSTI to the virtue of the emperor, but the images of Commodus, dressed as a hunter, spearing a lion or a panther. Just like with Nero, this was deeply shocking to the traditional Roman elite. The emperor was supposed to be the commander of armies, not a performer in the arena, killing animals for sport. It was seen as undignified, a betrayal of his station. But Commodus didn't stop there. His ego was boundless. He began to see himself not just as a great gladiator, but as the reincarnation of a god. Not a stately, ruling god like Jupiter, but the ultimate physical hero Hercules. And so began one of the strangest rebranding exercises in Roman history. Commodus officially renamed himself Lucius Aelius Aurelius Commodus Augustus Hercules Romanus. He even renamed the months of the year after his own long list of names. This delusion was, of course, broadcast on his coins. This is where it gets truly bizarre. You start to see coins where the obverse portrait of the emperor is no longer just Commodus in a laurel wreath. Instead, he is depicted with the signature attributes of Hercules. He is shown wearing the lionskin headdress that was Hercules' most famous trophy, with the lion's paws tied under his chin. Sometimes the reverse of the coin will show Hercules' club and bow. The message was not subtle. Commodus was just like Hercules. He was Hercules. He was a living god on earth, and his godlines was based not on wisdom or justice, but on pure brute strength. This leads to one of the more comical and yet profound debates among historians. What on earth was he thinking? Was this a sign of genuine clinical insanity? Had absolute power corrupted him so completely that he lost all touch with reality? Or was there a political calculation, however misguided, behind it? Some scholars have argued that this was a populist move. While the senators were horrified, perhaps the common people and the soldiers were impressed by an emperor who was also a celebrity athlete and a living strongman. Maybe he was trying to build a new kind of populist brand, one based on spectacle and physical power, bypassing the traditional elites entirely. In this view, he was crazy. He was just playing to a different audience. Most historians, it should be said, lean towards the he was dangerously unstable theory. Here's a wonderfully weird detail that perfectly captures the absurdity of his reign. He issued a specific coin that shows his bust with the lion skin on the front, and on the reverse, an inscription surrounded by a wreath that reads HERCVL IROMANOAVG to the Roman Hercules Augustus. This coin essentially declared him a god in his own lifetime, a line even most arrogant emperors were careful not to cross so explicitly. But the truly wild part is the iconography on the reverse. It shows a club, a bow, and a quiver, all symbols of Hercules. This coin is no longer about the Roman state. It's a personal ad for the emperor's divine identity. He had transformed the imperial currency into his own superhero merchandise. This campaign of self-deification reached its peak when he had statues of himself as Hercules erected all over Rome. The final straw, according to the historian Cassius Dio, was his plan to appear before the Senate on New Year's Day dressed as a consul and a gladiator simultaneously, to inaugurate his new era. This was too much. A conspiracy was formed, involving his own chamberlain and his mistress, and he was assassinated on New Year's Eve, 192 AD. His brand of muscular divinity had failed spectacularly. The story of Commodus' coins is a cautionary tale. It shows that the imperial brand, as powerful as it was, still had limits. It relied on a certain shared understanding of Roman values, dignity, authority, military prowess, and piety. Commodus threw all of that away in favor of a personal brand based on showbiz and superhuman vanity. When you hold one of his Hercules coins, you are holding a testament to what happens when the most powerful man in the world confuses being an emperor with being a celebrity action hero. It's a small metal artifact of a monumental ego. The murder of Commodus followed by the brief and chaotic reign of Perdiccans and a literal auctioning off of the throne, plunged the empire right back into a brutal civil war. The Golden Age was definitively over. The winner who emerged from this bloody mess was a tough, ruthless general from North Africa named Septimus Severus. He was another military man like Vespasian who took power by force and needed to sell his new regime to a skeptical and exhausted empire. But the world he inherited was different from Vespasian's. It was darker, more dangerous, and the political branding needed to reflect that. This is the beginning of the Barracks Emperor's era, and the coins in your pocket start to feel heavier, not with silver, but with military seriousness. When you get your first coins of Septimus Severus, you notice a dramatic shift in tone from the Antonine era. The portraits are no longer philosophical and serene. Severus is depicted as a stern, unsmiling military commander. He has a long, forked beard, a style associated with Greek philosophers, but there's no softness in his eyes. It's a look that says I am in charge because my legions are bigger than your legions. The branding message on the reverse of the coins becomes overwhelmingly military. While earlier emperors celebrated peace and tranquility, Severus's coins celebrate the source of his power, the army. You see a profusion of coins with inscriptions like FID, IXE or CITVS, the fidelity of the armies, or CONCO or DIMILITVM, the harmony of the soldiers. HES not talking to the senators or the people of Rome, HES talking to his troops, and HES using the public currency to do it. HES reminding them of their importance and, by extension, reminding everyone else who his real power base is. One of his most famous and revealing coin types shows the goddess Victory, flying to place a wreath on his head. But the inscription is Wutskivi, ICTICTAET, are an eternal victory. This wasn't about a single, specific victory like Trajan's Dacian wars. It was about a state of perpetual military success. The brand of the empire was becoming one of constant, grinding warfare. The main job of the emperor was no longer to be a civic administrator or a benevolent father figure. It was to be the commander-in-chief, perpetually defending the frontiers against ever-increasing threats. This period, known as the 3rd Century Crisis, was a time of intense instability. For about 50 years, from the death of the Severan dynasty to the rise of Diocletian, emperors came and went with terrifying speed. Most of them were generals, raised to power by their troops, and they rarely lasted more than a few years before being assassinated by a rival or their own men. This frantic, violent turnover is starkly reflected in the coinage. The portraits on the coins become less refined and more brutally realistic. These were of hard-bitten soldiers, and they look like it. The faces are often grim, anxious, and militaristic. The artistry of the Antonine Age is gone, replaced by a kind of urgent, almost crude realism. The mints were working overtime, trying to keep up with the constant changes in leadership. As soon as one emperor was killed, the mints had to scramble to get coins with the new guy's face into circulation as quickly as possible to establish his claim and pay the soldiers who had just put him in power. The coins themselves feel rushed. This chaotic reality leads to a fascinating historical debate. Did the decline in the artistic quality of the coins reflect a broader cultural decline in the Roman Empire during this period? Or was it simply a practical response to a crisis? The decline argument suggests that the crude style of the portraits and the repetitive military themes are evidence of a loss of skill, resources, and classical refinement. The empire was breaking down, and its art, even on coins, showed it. The practicality argument, however, states that this is not a decline, but an adaptation. In a time of constant war, the message needed to be simple, direct, and produced quickly. The most important thing was to get the emperor's portrait as brand out to the legions. A finely sculpted, philosophically nuanced portrait was a luxury the empire could no longer afford. The brand needed to be fast, cheap, and effective. Here's a small, telling detail from this era. You start to see an increase in what are known as barbarous radiates. These were unofficial, often very crude copies of official Roman coins, made in provincial workshops or even outside the empire's borders. The quality is often terrible. The portraits look like cartoons, and the inscriptions are garbled nonsense. The reason for their existence is simple in the chaos. The official supply of currency from Rome was unreliable. Local economies still needed coins to function, so they just made their own. It's a physical manifestation of the central government's loss of control. The official brand is becoming so weak and diluted that people are literally creating their own bootleg versions just to keep the markets running. When you hold a coin from the 3rd century crisis, you are holding a piece of evidence from a very dark time. It's a physical artifact of political instability. The face on it is likely that of a man who died violently after a very short reign. The message on the back is almost certainly about the military. It's a coin that speaks of anxiety, of a world where the only brand that matters anymore is loyalty to the legions, and even that could change overnight. It's the brand of an empire on the brink of collapse. You're living through the 3rd century crisis, and the military branding on the coins is getting more and more intense. But you've also started to notice something else, something you can feel in the palm of your hand. The coins just don't feel right anymore. The denarius, the silver coin that had been the backbone of the Roman economy for centuries, used to be a satis-filled heavy piece of nearly pure silver. Now the new ones feel lighter, flimsy, and they have a strange coppery sheen to them. This isn't just your imagination. You are witnessing the debasement of currency, a slow-motion economic collapse, and the emperor's brand is getting devalued along with it. The problem was simple. The emperors of this period needed money. They needed it to pay the soldiers whose loyalty was the only thing keeping them in power, and they needed it to fight the constant wars on the frontiers. But the state was broke. The traditional sources of income, like taxes from peaceful, productive provinces and loot from conquered territories, were drying up. So, emperors resorted to a trick that governments have used throughout history. They started messing with the money itself. It began subtly. An emperor would order the mint to produce new coins that were the same size and shape as the old ones, but with slightly less silver and a little more base metal, like copper, mixed in. At first, you might not notice, but the next emperor would do it again, and the next, and the next. Each one decreased the silver content just a little bit more to stretch the state's supply of precious metal. They were essentially creating more silver coins without having more silver. This process is called debasement. What you're holding in your hand now is probably not a denarius, but an Antoninus. This coin was first introduced by the Emperor Caracalla as a new, larger silver coin. The gimmick was that it was valued at a denarii, but it only contained about 1.5 times the silver. It was a sneaky form of inflation from the very beginning. By the middle of the 3rd century crisis, this coin, the Antoninus, had replaced the denarius as the main denomination, but its silver content was in free fall. What started as a respectable silver coin became, over the course of a few decades, a sad little bronze coin with a thin silver wash on the outside. This wash would wear off quickly in circulation, revealing the worthless metal underneath. This has a direct impact on the imperial brand. For centuries, the image of the emperor on a piece of good, solid silver was a guarantee of value. The emperor's authority backed a coin's worth, and the coin's intrinsic worth backed the emperor's authority. It was a symbiotic relationship. But now when you receive a coin with the emperor's face on it that feels like a cheap token, that relationship breaks down. The brand is now associated with fraud. The emperor's portrait is literally on a lie. It's a physical promise of silver that is, in reality, just copper. This economic reality is a topic of intense study for historians and economists. One of the major debates is about the consequences of this debasement. Did the government's monetary policy cause the economic crisis, or was it merely a desperate symptom of a crisis that was already happening due to plague, invasion, and civil war? It's a complex puzzle. Some argue that the runaway inflation caused by pumping worthless currency into the economy destroyed people's savings, shattered commercial confidence, and led to a collapse in trade. Others argue that the emperors had no choice. It was either debase the currency or lose the army and the empire. In this view, the monetary shenanigans were not the cause of the illness, but a messy and painful form of treatment. Here's our little detail that shows how desperate things got. At the height of the crisis, the coins are not just low-quality metal, they are often shockingly badly made. The dies used to strike the coins would be used long after they should have been retired. You'll find coins where the emperor's portrait is blurry and distorted, or where parts of the inscription are missing because the die was cracked or worn out. They were churning them out so fast, and with such little regard for quality control, that the final product was often a mess. The imperial brand, which used to be so crisp and carefully managed, was now literally falling apart at the edges. This debasement had a profound psychological effect. Imagine being a merchant. You sell a cartload of grain for a bag of what are supposed to be silver coins. But you know that in a year, or even a few months, those same coins might buy you only half a cartload. Money is no longer a stable store of value. So what do? You might resort to barter, trading grain directly for wine or pottery. Or you might start hoarding the older coins, the ones with the higher silver content, and only spend the new junky ones. This is an economic principle known as Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good. The result is a society that is losing faith in its own currency. So, the coin in your hand tells the parallel stories of decline. The image on its surface tells a story of military desperation of an empire under siege. But the metal it's made from tells a story of economic desperation, of a government slowly going bankrupt and taking the value of its own brand down with it. It's a sad, flimsy object that represents an empire that was, in more ways than one, running on empty. You are living in a world of chaos. The coins are junk, emperors last about as long as a jug of milk, and the frontiers are constantly under attack. The military brand of the barracks emperors has failed to bring stability. The old gods Jupiter, Mars, Juno seem to have abandoned Rome. The empire is suffering from not just a military and economic crisis, but a crisis of confidence, a spiritual sickness. To fix this, a new type of emperor emerges, and he brings with him a new kind of brand, one that is simpler, more universal, and shines with the light of a single, powerful god soul in Victus, the unconnected sun. The emperor who really champions this new brand is a man named Aurelian. He was another tough-as-nails general who came to power in 270 AD, and he was remarkably effective. He defeated barbarian invaders, crushed breakaway empires in both the East and West, and reunified the Roman world. For these achievements, he was given the title Restituto, or Orbis, Restorer of the World, and he put this title all over his coins. But he knew that military victory wasn't enough. He needed a new idea to hold his restored empire together. So Aurelian established the cult of Sol in Victus as the primary, official religion of the Roman state. This was a brilliant move for several reasons. Sun worship was already popular and widespread throughout the empire, especially among the soldiers. It was a universal deity that could appeal to people from Syria to Spain, unlike the specifically Roman gods of the old pantheon. The sun was a symbol of power, light, and regularity, all things the empire desperately needed. By making Sol the supreme god, Aurelian was trying to create a new, unifying spiritual core for his reborn state. And, of course, this new state religion was heavily promoted on the coinage. You begin to see a dramatic shift in the imagery on the reverse of the coins. Instead of the endless depictions of soldiers or victory, you now see Sol. He is usually shown as a youthful, athletic figure, often with one hand raised in a gesture of power and the other holding a globe, symbolizing world dominion. He wears the radiate crown, the spiky sun god crown you've seen before, but now it's his defining feature. The most common inscription on these coins is SOAINVICT OCOMITI to the unconnected sun, the companion of the emperor. This branding is subtle and powerful. It doesn't claim that the emperor is the sun god. Instead, it claims that the sun god is the emperor's personal friend, his divine partner in the project of ruling the world. It elevates the emperor, making him the earthly representative of the most powerful cosmic force. When you, a farmer or a merchant, use this coin, you are being constantly reminded that your leader is backed by the sun itself. It's a message of overwhelming, universal power. The portrait of the emperor on the obverse also changes. Aurelian and his successors are often shown with a stern, commanding, almost otherworldly gaze. They too wear the radiate crown, visually linking them directly to their divine companion, Sol. The brand is now one of divine partnership. The emperor and the sun god are a team working together to restore and to protect the world. This move to a single, supreme deity is a subject of intense historical debate. Was this a genuine religious revolution, a move towards monotheism that paved the way for the eventual Christianization of the empire? Or was it a purely political calculation? Some historians argue that Aurelian was a pragmatist who saw a fragmented empire and realized that a one God, one emperor policy was the best way to enforce unity. By promoting a single, universal deity, he was creating a religious framework that mirrored and reinforced his own absolute political authority. In this view, Saul was less a matter of faith and more to love statecraft, a divine brand for an autocratic government. Here's a small but fascinating detail that connects this ancient branding to our world today. Aurelian built a magnificent new temple to Sol Invictus in Rome and established a new festival in his honor, with games held every 4 years. The official birthday of the unconert sun, the dies natalis solis invicti, was celebrated on December 25th. This was the date of the winter solstice in the Roman calendar, the day when the daylight hours begin to lengthen again, the rebirth of the sun. Sound familiar? It's widely believed that the Christian Church, centuries later, chose this same popular date to celebrate the birth of Jesus, as a way of co-opting a major pagan festival and making the transition to Christianity easier for the general population. The branding of Sol was so successful that its ghost still lingers in our modern holiday calendar. So as Aurelian knew, slightly better quality coins begin to circulate. They carry a message of hope and renewal. The emperor is the restorer of the world, and his divine companion, the unconert sun, is a daily promise that light will triumph over darkness, that order will overcome chaos. This new, solar-powered brand was an attempt to give the battered, cynical population of the late 3rd century something to believe in again. It was a simple, powerful idea. No matter how dark things get, you can trust in the emperor, because every single morning, his divine business partner rises in the east to prove his power. The solar-powered brand of Aurelian and his successors brought a temporary stability, but the empire's underlying problems were still there. The system was still vulnerable to ambitious generals and civil war. It took one final brilliant and ruthless organizer to truly end the crisis and reshape the Roman world, the Emperor Diocletian. He was a man who looked at the chaotic, ad hoc system of imperial rule and decided it needed a complete corporate restructuring. His solution was radical, and it created a new brand of imperial power that was unlike anything you had seen before. He invented the tetrarchy, the rule of 4. Diocletian realized the empire was simply too big and had too many borders under threat for one man to manage effectively. So, he split the job. He kept the eastern half for himself and gave the western half to a trusted military colleague, Maximian. They both took the senior title of Augustus. Then each Augustus appointed a junior emperor, a Caesar, to serve as their deputy and chosen successor. Now you had 2 rulers in the east and 2 in the west, a board of directors for the Roman Empire. The goal was to provide stable leadership in all major regions and, most importantly, to solve the succession crisis once and for all. When a senior Augustus retired or died, his junior Caesar would automatically take his place and appoint a new Caesar. It was a clear, mechanical line of succession. This new political reality required a new kind of branding, and it is starkly, almost shockingly, reflected on the coins. You are a government clerk in Nicomedia, Diocletian's new eastern capital. You receive your salary in a new type of coin, a bronze piece called a phallus. On the obverse is a portrait of one of the emperors, but which one? It's almost impossible to tell. Under the tetrarchy, the concept of the individual imperial portrait, which had been the bedrock of coin branding for 300 years, was deliberately suppressed. Instead of the realistic, personal portraits of the past, the coins of the tetrarchy show a generic, stylized image of an emperor. It's a hard, blocky, abstract face. The features are identical whether the inscription names Diocletian Maximian or one of the junior Caesars. They all have the same square jaw, the same intense, staring eyes, and the same military crew cut. The only way to know who it is to read the small letters of the inscription. This was a radical and deliberate choice. The message was no longer about the individual, it was about the office. It wasn't "this is your emperor, Diocletian." It was "this is an emperor, a member of the ruling college that protects you. The branding on the reverse of the coins reinforces this message of unity and collective power. One of the most common and iconic images of this period is the inscription GENIOPOPVLIROM, DNI to the genius of the Roman people. The image shows the genius, the guardian spirit of the people, standing, holding a cornucopion de plateris, sacrificial dish. It's a message of shared identity and divine protection, not from a single ruler, but from the imperial system as a whole. You might also see coins showing the four tetrarchs themselves, sacrificing together or being crowned by the gods. The brand is harmony, unity, and stability. This dramatic shift in artistic style has been the subject of endless historical debate. Why did they abandon the classical tradition of realistic portraiture for this stark, abstract style? The decline theory, which we saw in the 3rd century crisis, suggests this was the final death of classical art, a loss of skill and aesthetic sensibility. But most historians today see it as a conscious and sophisticated artistic choice, a new style for a new type of government. Diocletian was creating a more remote, more divine, and more authoritarian model of emperorship. The emperor was no longer the princeps, the first citizen like Augustus. He was the dominus, the master. The abstract, impersonal portrait on the coin enhanced this sense of distance and divine authority. The emperor is not a man you can relate to, he is an icon, a symbol of unshakable power. Here's a small detail that perfectly encapsulates the tetrarch brand. There are famous porphyry statues of the four tetrarchs, now embedded in a corner of street Mark's Basilica in Venice. They are carved in the same blocky, abstract style as the coins. The two senior Augusti embrace the two junior Caesars, but all four figures are nearly identical. They wear the same military garb and the same style of hat. Their faces are interchangeable. It's a perfect visual representation of their political idea for bodies, one mind. The brand is no longer personal, it's corporate. It's the logo of Empire, Inc. Holding a tetrarch phallus is a strange experience. The individual personality that was the hallmark of Roman coin branding for centuries is gone, replaced by a cold, hard mask of power. It's a coin that projects stability and order, but at the cost of humanity. Diocletian's reforms did, for a time, pull the empire back from the brink. He stabilized the economy, reformed the military, and secured the borders. His corporate branding was, in many ways, a success. But it created a system that was rigid and impersonal. The problem, as it would turn out, was that the system was still run by humans, with all their ambitions and rivalries. The carefully constructed brand of impersonal unity was about to be shattered by the colossal ego of one man who wanted his face and his god to be the only one that mattered. The tetrarch, with its brand of corporate unity and interchangeable emperors, was a brilliant machine. But it had one fatal flaw: it didn't account for personal ambition. The system was designed to prevent civil war, but when Diocletian and his co-emperor Maximian abdicated in 305 AD, the machine sputtered, and a new power struggle began. Out of this chaos rose the man who would once again revolutionize the empire and its branding, Constantine the Great. And he would do it by introducing a new, and ultimately world-changing, symbol to the imperial toolkit. When Constantine first comes onto the scene as the son of one of the original Caesars, his early coins play by the tetrarch rules. He issues coins celebrating the genius of the Roman people and linking himself to the solar faith with reverses dedicated to Sol Invictus. He was still using the established brand of his rivals. But Constantine was ambitious, and he had a vision. The famous story, likely a piece of his own later propaganda, is that before the decisive battle of the Milvia Bridge in 312 AD, he had a vision. He saw a cross of light in the heavens and heard the words "In hoc signo vinces," "In this sign you will conquer." He ordered his soldiers to paint a Christian symbol, the Chi-Rho, the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek, on their shields. He won the battle, and from that moment on his personal brand became increasingly intertwined with the Christian God. But he was a master politician, and he knew he couldn't just switch the empire's branding to Christianity overnight. The majority of the population, and especially the army and the elite, were still pagan. So he began a slow, subtle, and utterly brilliant campaign of transitioning the imperial brand. You are living through this transition, and the coins in your hand become a fascinating puzzle, a showcase of religious ambiguity. At first, the changes are almost unabateable. Constantine continues to issue coins with the popular Sol and Bitkas theme. The unconnerked sun was a useful bridge. The sun could be interpreted as a pagan god by traditionalists, while for some Christians, Christ was also associated with light and the Son of Righteousness. The branding was deliberately flexible. But then, you might get a coin where the image of Saul looks a little different, or you might see a standard military banner vexillum, but with a small, almost hidden Cairo symbol at the top. It's a soft launch of the new brand. One of the most famous and debated coins of this period shows a standard with the inscription SP, ESPUBLICA, the hope of the public. The standard itself is depicted piercing a serpent on the ground. For a pagan, this could be interpreted as a generic image of good triumphing over evil. But for a Christian, the symbolism was unmistakable. It was the banner of Christ, the church triumphing over Satan, the serpent. The coin was designed to be read differently by different audiences. It was a masterpiece of inclusive propaganda. As Constantine consolidated his power and became the sole ruler of the empire, the Christian symbolism became more in your face. He issued coins showing the labarum, his personal military standard that was topped with the Cairo monogram. On the reverse of one famous type, the labarum is shown standing between two of his soldiers. The inscription, GLO or IA, Exercitivs, the glory of the army. He is directly associating the army's success and glory with this new Christian symbol. The brand of the military is being officially transferred from the old gods to the new one. The nature of Constantine's own faith is one of the most hotly debated topics in all of ancient history. Was he a genuine, pious convert who truly believed the Christian God had given him the empire? Or was he a shrewd political genius who saw that the fast-growing, highly organized Christian church was the future, a tool he could use to unify the state and secure his dynasty? Was his conversion a matter of the heart or a matter of the head? The coins, with their careful, gradual introduction of Christian symbols, can be used to argue either case. A true believer might have moved slowly so as not to alienate his subjects. A cynical operator would have done exactly the same thing. Here's a wonderfully strange detail that captures this ambiguity. Constantine was not baptized as a Christian until he was on his deathbed. For his entire reign, he also retained the old pagan title of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of the traditional Roman state religion. And for a long time, coins with his portrait on the front would have pagan gods on the back. Then, something new happens. After he moves the capital of the empire to his new city, Constantinople, he issues a series of commemorative coins. One celebrates ROM, the old Rome, and the other celebrates CONSTANTIN, GOPOI as the new. The coin for old Rome shows the traditional founders, Romulus and Remus, being suckled by the she-wolf. The coin for New Rome shows the goddess Victory. But above the she-wolf, you might see two stars representing the Dioscuri, the pagan twin gods. At the same time, HES building magnificent churches and presiding over Christian councils. His branding was, for a long time, a balancing act, a carefully managed portfolio of old and new beliefs. When you hold a coin of Constantine, you are holding a pivotal moment in Western history. You are witnessing the slow, deliberate pivot of an entire empire's ideological foundation. The face on the coin is the man who, for reasons we will never fully know, decided to bet on a new god. He took the most powerful brand in the world, the Roman emperor, and merged it with a faith that his predecessors had persecuted. The result was a new synthesis of power, a Christian empire, and a branding model that would dominate Europe for the next 1,000 years. You've spent all this time looking at the final product, the little metal discs that are the engine of the imperial branding machine. You've seen how the messages change, how the portraits evolve, and how the quality of the metal itself tells a story. But have you ever stopped to think about how these things are actually made? The process of turning a lump of metal into a piece of sophisticated propaganda is its own fascinating journey. So let's step away from the marketplace and into the hot, noisy, and surprisingly secretive world of a Roman mint. First, you need a location. The main mint, of course, was in Rome itself, often located on the Capitoline Hill near the Temple of Juno Moneta, which is where we get our words mint and money. But as the empire grew, relying on a single mint became impractical. It was too slow to get new currency out to the legions on the frontiers. So a network of provincial mints was established in major cities like Lugdunum and modern Lyon, Antioch, and Alexandria. This is one reason you'll often see small letters on your coins, like LUG or ALE. They are mint marks, a little made-in stamp that tells you where the coin was born. This also helped with accountability. If a batch of coins was found to be underweight or low in precious metal content, the central government knew which mint director to blame. The process starts with the raw materials gold, silver, bronze, and copper. In the early empire, this metal might come from mines in Spain or Dacia. In later, more chaotic times, it was more likely to come from melting down older coins or confiscating the temple treasures of a newly conquered people. This metal is melted down in a crucible, a ceramic pot that can withstand intense heat. The master of the forge would have to get the alloy just right, especially in the later empire when the recipes for silver coins were a complex and secret blend of silver, copper, and other metals. Once the molten metal is ready, it's used to create the coin blanks or flans. There are a couple of ways to do this. You could pour the metal into round molds, or you could pour it into sheets and then cut out the round blanks like cookies from dough. Another method was to cast long rods of metal and slice them into discs. However it was done, the result was a pile of small, unmarked metal discs. These were then heated again in a furnace to make them soft and ready for the most important part of the process. This is where the artists and engravers come in. The man who carved the master dies, the cellator, was a highly skilled and often respected artist. Working in hardened bronze or iron, he would have to carve the emperor's official portrait in the reverse design in intricate detail, in negative. This was incredibly difficult work. He had to get the likeness just right based on official sculptures or portraits sent from Rome. He had to carve the tiny letters of the inscriptions backwards. A single slip of the tool could ruin the die. For each batch of coins, you need to dice the obverse front die, often called the anvil die, and the reverse back die, called the hammer or punch die. The debate among specialists is how much creative freedom these cellatores had. Did the mint in Antioch, for example, receive a detailed blueprint from Rome for every single new coin type? Or did they just get a general instruction like the emperor wants a coin celebrating his victory in Persia, and the local engraver was responsible for the artistic interpretation? The variations in style between different mints suggest there was a fair amount of local autonomy. But the core elements of the imperial brand, the titles, the key symbols were strictly controlled. Now for the main event, the striking. The anvil die, with the emperor's portrait, is set firmly into a heavy workbench or anvil. A worker, the supposed ore, places a heated, soft flan onto the anvil die. Another worker, the mole-eater, takes the punch die, places it on top of the flan and holds it steady. Then, with a single powerful blow from a heavy sledgehammer, he strikes the top of the punch die. WHAM. In that split second, the soft metal is forced into every tiny groove of both dies. The emperor's face is stamped into the front, the propaganda message is stamped onto the back, and a blank piece of metal becomes an official coin of the Roman Empire. The process is then repeated thousands upon thousands of times a day. It was hot, loud, and dangerous work, and because they were literally making money, security was intense. Mint workers were often kept in isolation, living and working within the mint complex to prevent theft or the leaking of metallurgical secrets. It was a factory, but it was also a fortress. When you look closely at a Roman coin, you can often see evidence of this handmade process. If the hammer blow wasn't perfectly centered, the design will be off-center. Sometimes you can see small cracks in the edge of the coin, a result of the violent pressure. Occasionally, a die would be used for so long that it would start to crack, and you can find coins with raised lines on them that are the ghostly impression of that crack. These little imperfections are a reminder that every single one of these coins was made by hand, one at a time, by a team of skilled, and likely exhausted, workers in a noisy, smoky workshop, all part of the great continent-spanning production line of the emperor's brand. You've seen how the message is designed in Rome and how the coin is physically made in a provincial mint. The propaganda machine has done its job. The finished product, a shiny new bronze phallus with the emperor's branding, is now ready for distribution. A bag of these coins is given to you, a soldier stationed at a fort on the Rhine frontier. The message seems simple enough. The coin shows the two reigning emperors united, with the inscription PAXAEETERNA Eternal Peace. It's a standard piece of late imperial branding. But the moment that coin leaves the mint and enters the real world, something fascinating happens. The sender loses control of the message. You and your fellow soldiers look at this coin. You've just spent the week skirmishing with a tribe that crossed the river. Eternal peace feels less like a description of reality and more like a cruel joke from some bureaucrat in a safe, warm office hundreds of miles away. Your interpretation of the coin is filtered through your own lived experience. The official brand message, everything is peaceful and stable, is immediately contradicted by the reality of your life on a dangerous frontier. Now imagine that coin travels a little further. You use it to pay a local Germanic trader for some furs. This trader lives outside the formal borders of the empire. He can't read the Latin inscription. He has no context for the carefully crafted brand of the two emperors. What does he see? He sees a piece of metal with a certain weight and a recognizable design. For him, the brand isn't about peace or imperial unity. It's about reliability. He knows that Roman coins are generally accepted for trade up and down the river. The image of the emperors is just a marker of authenticity, a guarantee that this isn't a worthless piece of scrap. The political message is completely lost. Only the economic one remains. The journey of the coin continues. The trader gives it to his son as a good luck charm. Now its function has changed entirely. It's no longer a tool of propaganda or a medium of exchange. It's an object of superstition. The son might believe that the two figures on the coin are protective spirits, or that the metal itself has some magical property. He might drill a hole in it and wear it around his neck. The emperor's carefully curated image has been transformed into a personal talisman, its meaning completely reinvented by its new owner. This process of reinterpretation is one of the most fascinating, undebated aspects of Roman coinage. Historians, particularly those who study the reception of propaganda, argue constantly about how these messages were understood by the diverse populations of the empire. The traditional top-down view assumes that the message was received more or less as intended. The state had a message. It put it on the coins, and the people understood it. But a more modern, bottom-up approach suggests that the meaning of a coin was not fixed. It was constantly being negotiated and reinterpreted. A peasant in Egypt with a cultural background stretching back thousands of years might look at an image of the goddess Annona and not see the Roman grain supply, but associate her with a local Egyptian deity of fertility. A recent convert to Christianity might see a coin of Saul in Wittgenstein, as we've discussed, see a symbol of Christ, deliberately reading a pagan symbol for their own purposes. A Celtic tribesman in Gaul might see the emperor's portrait and associate it with the local tradition of venerating severed heads as symbols of power. The brand is not a static message, it's a starting point for a conversation, and everyone brings their own cultural baggage to that conversation. Here's a specific, weird example. In India, thousands of miles from Rome, archaeologists have found hoards of Roman gold and silver coins. The Romans traded extensively with India for spices and other luxuries, but some of these coins have been deliberately defaced, with small counter marks or scratches on the emperor's face. Why, we can't know for sure, but one theory is that for the local merchants, the image of a foreign king on their gold was irrelevant or even offensive. They were interested in the precious metal content, not the Roman brand. So they cancelled the portrait, neutralizing its political message and turning it into a simple, depersonalized piece of bullion. It was an act of cultural resistance, a way of saying, your emperor has no power here, only your gold does. So that little coin, designed with such care in the capital, takes on a wild and unpredictable life of its own once it enters the vast multicultural world of the Roman Empire and beyond. Its message can be accepted, ignored, misunderstood, or completely transformed. The brand that seems so clear and powerful at the center becomes fuzzy and distorted at the edges. It's a powerful reminder that communication is always a two-way street. The emperor can shout his message as loud as he wants, but he can never fully control how it's heard. You've seen how the official imperial brand can be reinterpreted, or even ignored once it leaves the mint. But there's another, even more direct challenge to the emperor's marketing monopoly: counterfeit coins. From the very beginning of Roman coinage, there have been people trying to make fake money. These forgeries and the barbarian imitations made just outside the empire's borders create a fascinating shadow narrative, a kind of fake news version of the official imperial story. Let's start with the classic Roman counterfeiter. HES not some grand political rebel. HES a small-time criminal trying to make a quick profit. His workshop is probably a hidden cellar or a secluded forest shack. His goal is to create a coin that looks and feels like a real silver denarius but is actually made of something cheap. The most common type of fake is the forgery, a French word meaning stuff. The process was clever. The counterfeiter would take a core of base metal like bronze or iron and wrap it in a thin layer of silver foil. He would then heat this blank and strike it with a pair of dies, just like in the official mint. The heat and pressure would fuse the silver foil to the core. The resulting coin looked for a little while just like solid silver. When you, an unsuspecting shopkeeper, receive one of these, you might be fooled at first. It has the emperor's portrait, the right inscriptions, and the silver sheen. But after it's been in circulation for a while, the thin silver layer starts to wear away, especially on the high points of the design, like the emperor's nose or the wreath in his hair. A small patch of dark, coppery metal will start to show through. It's like the brand's respectable facade is literally peeling away to reveal the cheap fraud underneath. Sometimes you find these coins with a small test cut or a chisel mark on them, where a suspicious merchant has deliberately pierced the surface to check the core. Then there are the cast forgeries. Instead of striking the coins, a counterfeiter would take a real denarius, make a clay mold of it, and then pour molten base metal into the mold. These are often easier to spot. They tend to have a soapy, indistinct feel, lacking the sharp detail of a struck coin. You might also see a small seam around the edge where the two halves of the mold didn't perfectly meet. In both cases, the counterfeiter is a parasite on the imperial brand. He is hijacking the emperor's good name and trusted image for his own illicit profit. The existence of these fakes leads to a constant, low-level arms race. The state develops methods to detect fakes, and the counterfeiters get better at making them. It also raises a difficult question for historians: how common were they? For a long time, it was assumed they were a minor nuisance, but some recent studies of coin hoards have suggested that, at certain times and in certain places, a surprisingly high percentage of the currency in circulation might have been counterfeit. The official brand was facing more competition than we used to think. But now let's move beyond simple crime and look at the barbarian imitations. These are a different beast altogether. All along the frontiers from Britain to the Black Sea, Germanic and other non-Roman tribes had extensive contact with the empire. They needed currency for their own internal economies, but they didn't have the tradition or the authority to create their own coinage from scratch. So they did the next best thing: they copied the most powerful and recognizable brand. They knew Roman coins. These imitations range from the slavishly accurate to the hilariously abstract. Some are so well made that it's difficult to tell them apart from official Roman issues. But many were made by engravers who couldn't read Latin and had only a vague idea of what the portrait was supposed to represent. On these coins, the emperor's noble classical profile devolves into a series of stick figure-like lines and dots. The horse on the reverse might look more like a strange dog. The Latin inscription devolves into a meaningless pattern of vertical strokes and circles, a decorative border that just gestures at the idea of writing. The debate here is, what did these imitations mean? Were they a genuine attempt to make functional currency for local use? Almost certainly yes. But were they also a form of political statement? Some scholars argue that by copying the emperor's coin but getting it wrong, these tribes were subtly asserting their own identity. They were adopting the form of Roman power but stripping it of its specific message, replacing the emperor's portrait with a face of their own design. It was a way of participating in the Roman economic world while remaining politically and culturally distinct. It wasn't a rejection of the brand, but a creative adaptation of it. So you have this whole shadow economy of fake and imitation coins circulating alongside the official ones. The official brand is all about order, authority, and authenticity. The counterfeit brand is about deception and illicit profit, and the imitation brand is about adaptation and the creation of new, hybrid identities on the edge of the empire. When you hold a crude, abstract-looking barbarian imitation of a Roman coin, you are holding a fascinating piece of cultural dialogue. It's a testament to the fact that the emperor's brand was so powerful that everyone wanted a piece of it, even if they had to make their own version. You've seen how the Colosseum was used as a massive advertisement for the Flavian dynasty. That spectacular coin was a powerful statement, but it was part of a much wider and long-running branding strategy using coins to celebrate the emperor as the empire's master builder. An army can win you a province, but an aqueduct, a bridge, or a grand new temple can win you the daily gratitude of the people. These structures were tangible, permanent symbols of the emperor's beneficence and his ability to shape the world for the better. And of course, if you build something amazing, you need to make sure everyone knows you built it. So emperors consistently used the small canvas of the reverse of a coin to showcase their greatest architectural hits. Think back to the reign of Trajan. We remember him for the Dacian Wars, but he used the vast treasure seized from Dacia to fund an unprecedented building program back in Rome. You already saw the coin advertising his Danube Bridge, a masterpiece of military engineering. But he also minted coins celebrating his civil projects. One of the most impressive is the coin that shows his new harbor at Ostia, the port of Rome. It's not just a simple drawing. It's a bird's eye view of the entire hexagonal basin, showing the docks, breakwaters, and even a colossal statue in the lighthouse. It's a detailed architectural blueprint on a piece of metal less than an inch across. The message to you, a merchant, is clear. I, your emperor, have made trade safer and more efficient. Your prosperity is my creation. This wasn't just about Rome. The emperors advertised their building projects all over the empire. You might find a coin from a Spanish mint showing a magnificent, multi-arched bridge, a testament to the emperor's investment in local infrastructure. In North Africa, coins were minted celebrating the construction of new aqueducts that brought life, giving water to arid regions. These coins were a way of localizing the emperor's brand. He wasn't just some distant figure in the capital. He was a direct benefactor to your specific province, the man who built the bridge you cross every day. The types of buildings chosen for the coins were, naturally, very deliberate. Temples were a popular choice. A coin showing a beautiful, newly restored temple to Jupiter or Mars was a way for the emperor to brand himself as pious, a dutiful servant of the gods who was upholding tradition. It was a physical manifestation of the Pax Deorum, the peace with the gods, that guaranteed the empire's success. Public entertainment venues, like the Colosseum, were another favorite. They were a direct appeal to the masses, a celebration of the bread and circuses that kept the urban population happy. You can find coins depicting the Circus Maximus, the great chariot racing stadium, showing its structure in surprising detail. These coins advertised the emperor as a generous provider of fun and spectacle. This architectural branding leads to a fascinating problem for archaeologists and historians. In some cases, these coins are our only evidence for what certain ancient buildings actually looked like. A temple or a triumphal arch might have been torn down centuries ago, its marble recycled into new buildings. But a small bronze coin buried in the ground can survive, preserving a tiny, detailed image of the lost structure. It's like finding a single surviving photograph of a long-demolished landmark. However, this also creates a debate: how realistic are these coin portraits of buildings? Were the mint engravers working from detailed architectural plans, creating faithful, miniature representations? Or were they creating a more stylized, idealized version of the building? For instance, a coin might show a temple with only 4 columns to make the design clearer, even if the real building had 8. Or it might exaggerate the size of the statues to make them more visible. Some historians argue that we should treat these images as largely symbolic, a kind of architectural shorthand. Others maintain that, within the limits of the small format, the engravers were striving for a surprising degree of realism. The truth is probably on a case-by-case basis. Some are clearly schematic, while others, like the austere harbor coin, seem to be aiming for genuine accuracy. Here's a wonderfully specific example. The Emperor Nero, for all his other faults, built a magnificent new market hall in Rome, the Macellum Magnum, and he minted a coin to show it off. The coin depicts a stunning, two-story, domed rotunda, a truly impressive piece of architecture. For a long time, this coin was the only evidence we had for this building's appearance. It was a ghost preserved only in bronze. So when you hold one of these architectural coins, you're re-holding a tiny piece of the Roman skyline. You are seeing the emperor's permanent mark on the landscape of the empire. These coins are a testament to a brand built not just on military victory or divine favor, but on concrete, stone, and marble. They are a celebration of the emperor as the ultimate civil engineer, a man who didn't just rule the world, but actively built it one aqueduct, one harbor, and one temple at a time. And he made sure to put a picture of it in your pocket so you'd never forget who to thank. You've seen the emperor's brand in many forms: the conquering general, the divine heir, the master builder, the guarantor of peace. But there was one promise, one brand attribute, that arguably mattered more to the average person than any other. It was the promise that lay at the very heart of the social contract between the emperor and his people, the guarantee of the food supply. For the hundreds of thousands of people packed into the city of Rome, and for the legions stationed on the frontiers, a disruption in the grain supply meant hunger, riots, and instability. The emperor who could keep the grain flowing was the emperor who could keep the peace. This fundamental promise was given a name and a face on the coins of the empire Annona. Annona was the goddess, or more accurately, the divine personification of the grain supply. She wasn't one of the old, powerful Olympian gods like Jupiter or Mars. She was a practical, bureaucratic goddess for a practical, bureaucratic empire. And from the time of Nero onwards, she becomes one of the most common and enduring figures on the reverse of Roman coins. When you look at a coin featuring Annona, you are looking at a very specific and carefully constructed piece of branding. She is usually depicted as a stately woman, often holding a cornucopia, the horn of plenty, which is a generic symbol of abundance. But she also has her own specific attributes. Very often she is shown holding a set of grain ears, the product that was the basis of the Roman diet. More interestingly, she is frequently depicted with a modius, which was a large cylindrical measuring basket used for grain. In the background, you will often see the prow of a ship. This collection of symbols is not random. It's a visual flowchart of the entire grain supply system. The ship's prow represents the massive fleets that sailed from the fertile provinces of Egypt and North Africa, the bread baskets of the empire, carrying grain across the Mediterranean. The modius and the grain ears represent the grain itself, the commodity being measured and distributed. And Annona herself represents the emperor's divine oversight of the entire process. The coin is a complete narrative. It says, thanks to the emperor's divine providence, the grain ships will arrive safely, the harvest will be plentiful, and the distribution will be orderly. The frequency of Annona's appearance on coins often corresponds to times of anxiety. If there had been a bad harvest, or if pirates were disrupting the sea lanes, an emperor would be sure to mint coins with Annona on them as a form of reassurance. It was a PR campaign designed to calm a nervous public. It was a way of saying, don't panic. I have this under control. The grain is coming. The brand is one of reliability and competence. This leads to a fascinating debate among economic historians. How much control did the emperor actually have? Was the appearance of Annona on a coin a reflection of a genuinely well-managed and successful grain supply? Or was it pure propaganda, an attempt to claim credit for a complex economic system that was largely beyond any single person's control? Some historians argue that the Roman state's logistical achievements were immense, and the emperor's role in organizing the cura Annonii, the administration of the grain supply, was very real. In this view, the Annona coins are a legitimate celebration of a remarkable administrative feat, but other historians are more skeptical. They argue that the emperor was often just lucky. Good harvests and safe seas had more to do with weather and local conditions than with anything the emperor did in Rome. By putting Annona on the coins, the emperor was essentially taking credit for good weather. It was a branding exercise to associate himself with prosperity. whether he had directly caused it or not. When things went well, he could point to the coins and say, "See, my divine providence is working." When things went badly, he could blame it on other factors and hope people forgot the promises on the coins. Here's a wonderfully mundane detail that shows just how central this was to daily life. The state provided a grain dole, a monthly distribution of free or subsidized grain to a huge number of Roman citizens. To receive your dole, you might have needed a special token, a tessera, and these bronze tokens were often decorated with the same imagery as the coins Annona with Herm Odious, or a ship arriving in port. The branding was consistent from the official silver currency down to the little token that got you your monthly ration of bread. The goddess Annona represents the ultimate imperial brand promise. It's not about abstract ideas like just a sore piety. It's not about distant victories in faraway lands. It's about your next meal. It's the most direct and personal commitment an emperor could make to his subjects. When you hold a coin with Annona on it, you are holding a symbol of the empire's most basic and vital function, feeding its people. It's a small metal assurance that the system is working, that the ships are sailing, and that tomorrow there will be bread on your table. It was the branding of survival. The brand has been through so much. It's been the face of peace and the face of war. It's been divine, philosophical, insane, and corporate. It has advertised buildings, heirs, virtues, and even the promise of food. But all things must end. As you move into the late 4th and early 5th centuries, you are witnessing the slow, painful dissolution of the Western Roman Empire. And just as the coins chronicled its rise and its glory, they now provide a stark, unflinching account of its final sputtering decline. You are living in Roman Britain in the year 407 AD. The legions have been withdrawn to deal with crises on the continent. The economy is collapsing. The regular supply of new coins from the imperial mints in Gaul has dried up. The emperor's brand, which for centuries was a daily presence, is now a fading memory. The last coins you see are probably clipped, worn-out silver pieces, or crude, locally made imitations of coins that are already decades old. The signal from the central government has gone silent. Back on the continent in the parts of the empire still under some semblance of Roman control, the mints are still working, but the product has changed dramatically. The portraits of the last Western Roman emperors, like Honorius or the tragically named Romulus Augustus, are a world away from the confident artistry of the early empire. The faces are often simplified, almost cartoonish. The profiles are flat. The eyes are just large, staring circles. The portraits lack any sense of personality or realism. They are just a formula, a placeholder for the idea of an emperor. The skill and resources to create sophisticated, individualized portraits are gone. The brand has lost its face. The quality of the metal continues to decline. Silver coins become smaller and smaller, and their silver content more and more unreliable. The most common coin you're likely to see is a tiny bronze NUMMUS, often no bigger than your little fingernail. These coins are often so poorly struck that the inscriptions are illegible and the portrait is a barely recognizable blob. It is the currency of a state that is running on fumes. Trying to decipher the branding on one of these late Roman bronzes is like trying to read a billboard in a thick fog. The message is still there technically, but it's almost impossible to make out. The subject matter on the reverse of the coins also reflects the desperate reality of the times. The confident celebration of architectural achievements or the philosophical persephoniscanes of virtues are long gone. The dominant themes are military and Christian, but in a simplified, almost defensive way. You'll see a lot of coins showing a Roman soldier spearing a fallen enemy horseman with the inscription FELTMPREPA, or the restoration of happy times. It's a brand that is desperately trying to convince you that victory is still possible, that the empire can still fight back. Another very common type shows the emperor holding the Christian Labarum standard with the inscription GLORI, ROMANO, or VN, the glory of the Romans. The brand is leaning heavily onto pillars, the army and God. It's a prayer stamped in metal. This decline leads to one of the final, sad debates among Roman numismatists. Does this collapse in the quality and artistry of the coinage represent the triumph of barbarism and religion, as the historian Edward Gibbon might have put it. Was the move away from classical realism a sign of cultural decay, a loss of the skills and values that had made Rome great? Or was it simply the final stage of the artistic evolution we saw beginning with the tetrarchy? Perhaps the flat, abstract, symbolic style was not a failure, but a deliberate choice for a different kind of world, a more spiritual and less humanistic one. In this view, the art didn't decline, it just changed to reflect the new realities of a Christianized, besieged empire. Here's a poignant final detail. One of the last coin types widely issued in the West before its final collapse shows a simple wreath on the reverse. Inside the wreath are the letters VOT for Vota, the traditional vows of loyalty taken for the emperor. For centuries, these coins had celebrated specific vows for, say, 10 or 20 years of rule. But now, they are often generic, a simple, almost forlorn expression of hope for the continuation of the state. The brand has run out of new things to say. All it can do is repeat the old formulas, like a mantra against the encroaching darkness. When you hold one of these tiny, crude, late Western Roman coins, you are holding the end of a story. The powerful, sophisticated, globe-spanning branding machine that began with Caesar and Augustus has ground to a halt. The face on the coin is no longer a confident assertion of power, it's a ghost. The message is no longer a promise of a golden age, but a desperate plea for survival. It is the last faint echo of a brand that had defined the Western world for half a millennium, a final, metallic whisper before the long silence